So, in this first part of the class, we are going to try to understand the difference between poi juggling and traditional juggling. Here, the point is to get the mechanic of poi juggling that is specific to poi. To do so, we are going to mainly focus on the no-bit throws, but pretty much everything that I'm going to explain applies to any forms of juggling with poi. Here we are going to talk a lot about momentum, because without momentum there is no movement. And it's the same with juggling. If we want to make an object move in the air, you need momentum. That leads us to the first observation I want to do. When you take a club or a ball or any static object, for me a static object means that if you catch one part of the object, whatever part of the object, the full object will stop. If you juggle with that static object, you have the choice. You can either stop the momentum and then throw again, but you can also choose to keep going with the momentum. With static objects, you have the choice. But if I take a poi, I don't have that choice anymore, because since the poi is not static, the poi is a floppy object. If I only catch one part of the object, it doesn't stop the full object itself. Because the object that is floppy is always influenced by the gravity. In general, any good juggler will tell you that it's better to juggle your clubs like this, following the momentum, which means that every time you're going to catch, you're going to go down with the object along with the movement. And that it's way better to do that than juggling like this, with a really fixed position and stopping the momentum every time to throw again. And that's why I think that poi spinning and poi juggling are extremely related. If you do any spinning pattern with poi, let's say a 4-petal anti-spin there, it is common sense that if I want the pattern to be clean, I should never ever stop my movement. For example, if I start stopping every time on the upper petal, it's going to do something like and the rope is going to get floppy, the pattern gets dirty. It is common sense that you should keep moving up, side and down to get a clean pattern. Well, it's the same thing with poi juggling. If I want the throws to be clean and not floppy, I need to follow through every time I catch. I won't do this, stopping the momentum every time. So this applies for this pendulum versus single rotation throw, but also and most of all for the no-bit throws. Every time I'm going to catch, I won't stop there, because if I stop there and try to throw again, it doesn't work as well. I need to use the momentum that was already there before I received the poi to throw again. So the idea is to never stop the momentum. With a club, if I want, I could catch my no-bit, stop there, and then throw it again. Stop there, throw it again, because it's a solid object. So here, the idea is that with poi juggling, you can't ever stop the momentum. There are a few exceptions, of course, with stalls to change the directions, but in general, if you want to keep a pattern going, you never ever stop the momentum. My second point will be that you also can't force the momentum, which is a very different thing. To understand that idea of forcing the momentum, we're going to take the example of a pendulum. So, this. There are many ways of doing a pendulum. I could do a pendulum like this, but also like this. This and this is extremely different regarding the momentum of the object. Here, I'm forcing the momentum every time. Here, I'm only using the momentum that is natural to the poi because I'm guiding it down as a little swing motion every time. I'm just guiding it down and up, but I'm never forcing it. So I get this nice float on every side. That makes it so that I could even do it barely holding onto the poi, and it's still working. If I try to do this and then suddenly open my hand, the poi will fall and go away. If I keep that nice and gentle pendulum where my hand is only here to keep the pendulum as a shape but not to force the momentum, it should be very easy to open your hands and get a very, very loose grip without having the poi going away. I take this example of the pendulum for two reasons. First is that because this idea of never forcing the pendulum applies to any movement you're going to do during juggling. You should never influence on the pendulum or whatever motion you're doing. You're just receiving it. My second point is that this way of doing the pendulums, respecting the natural momentum, is the way to start pretty much every cascade pattern with poi. So for example, to start pendulum versus singles, you can see that I'm starting with two synchronized pendulum and then throwing. And then I keep going with pendulums. And here, those pendulums that I do every time respect the same idea. I'm never going behind and forcing it in front. I'm going behind and I'm waiting for the head to go slightly up, and so that the gravity is the one that makes the poi go back forwards. It's not my hand that makes the poi come back, it's the gravity and the weight of the head falling down. Respecting those nice and loose pendulum before initiating a cascade is extremely important. Before and during, especially for this type of cascade that has a pendulum every time you catch. In the no-beat cascades, if you fuck up on this starting, I think it's like twice as hard to do the no-beat cascades if you don't acknowledge that starting of pendulum. Normally for the no-beat cascade, it's always this little timing of like 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. It's almost same time, but not exactly. The heads, like the hands of the right and the hand of the left, are following each other very closely. If they were following each other even closer, they would be same time. So it's like a very slight split time. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. And to come back to this explanation, we're going to compare if I force the momentum, so the bad form, and if I do it without forcing the momentum, the good form. Good form, you can see that there is this little stalling. I'm using the word stalling very carefully here, because here it stalls in the air, but it's not a stall. I'm not forcing it back forwards. And that's the idea to remember. Here, it's stopping a little bit just because the momentum made it go up, and then it's about to go down to take momentum again by itself. But then here, this is the difference between this and this. We also have a little stalling point there, but here it's closer to the common idea of stalling with poi, where I'm forcing it to go back. And this is something that you should at all costs avoid with poi juggling. A very important thing to focus on in any juggling pattern whatsoever with poi, and actually with any other objects, is the grip. In all cases, I'm going to use what I will call a gentle grip or a loose grip, which means that my hand isn't actually really holding on to the knob or the tether. It's just there in a shape that happens to be perfect, so that when you put your hands at the good spot, the poi is normally going to get stuck into it. Here, my grip might have been a bit too loose. So yeah, here the idea is that the poi should get stuck into your hand without having your hands actually catching it. The shape of your grip and the looseness of your grip is extremely important. Make sure I have a loose grip. The main thing I'm focusing on with any juggling props is to avoid having my thumb implied into the grip. Because the thumb, more than all of the other fingers, is the one that will bring tension in the full arm and therefore make it very difficult to follow the momentum and go down along with the object. You can easily make the experiment of having a ball in your hand like this, with your thumb away and over your four fingers there. And ask someone to try and bring your arm lower like this, without applying any tension of your arm. You just let the other person do it. And of course, for this person it's going to be extremely easy to bring it lower. Do the exact same thing, but putting your thumb, a slight pressure with your thumb on the ball. And you will see that all of a sudden, for this other person, it's going to be way more difficult to bring your arm lower. Because the thumb, by applying even a slight pressure, is going to make the movement of the full arm more difficult. This is therefore something I apply with my grip of poi. So the thumb is always either away like this, it can just be there, but you have to make sure that it's not pressuring in any way possible. And the second element that's very important is to get somewhat of a circle shape with your fingers here to make sure that when you are about to catch, the poi gets stuck into your hand like this. You don't want this, you just want this. So all of the fingers are slightly opened, but it keeps a shape that makes it so that when you are at the point where you should catch, the poi gets stuck into your hand. To conclude that first part of the workshop, I would say that the sentence you should remember is, it's not about catching and throwing, it's about guiding through and releasing without disturbing the momentum, but keeping the shape of the momentum. And that leads us to the second part, the shape of the momentum. Until now, we are only speaking about how much power you put into the momentum, whether you stop it or not. But the second factor that defines the momentum along with his power is its shape. For the same amount of power into the momentum, you can have a different shape. For example, in spin and T-spin. This is the most common way to see it, but for me the most interesting thing to look at would be, for example, spin versus cat-eye. Both are technically a spin, but when you do a spin here, you can feel that the momentum repartition is extremely even. Along the full circle, you have the same momentum repartition. With a cat-eye, most of the momentum is only from here all the way down to here, but you can feel that there is this upper point here, from here to here and here, where the poi is actually just floating, the same way that you would do a throw. Actually, the cat-eye movement is extremely similar to the novice mechanic. A good way to see and understand that idea of shape memory of the momentum is to see this. If I turn around and go up and down like this, creating that little wave effect up and down like this, phew. Of course, at first, I'm initiating it with my arm, going up and down with my arm and my wrist to change the shape of the momentum. But let's say here, I'm going to start doing it, and after a few circles, I'm going to stop moving my arm. Let's see what happens. So here, I'm voluntarily doing it, up and down, and then here I stop. You can see that before the poi gets static and starts just normally turning horizontally, there has been a few seconds where the poi was still going up and down, way more minimally than before, but still. All of that to highlight the fact that on one action that you do with your objects, the momentum and the shape of this momentum that you had on this one action will have a huge influence on the actions after. An easy example is when you juggle and you fuck up on one throw, it will sometimes take up like 5 more throws, correcting every time the throws to get back to the pattern the way it should be. With traditional juggling, the juggling is always going vertically, so all the objects are going up and down in a vertical shape. But with no-bit juggling or radial juggling, you're always following a circular momentum. With poi, it's also true for no-bits, but as well for pretty much any juggling. So no-bit throws, circular momentum, single rotation throws with pendulums, although they might feel like the object is going up in the air, you're taking the momentum from a circular motion, this half circle that is the pendulum, and then the weight ratio of the poi makes it so that it goes vertical for a while. But if I were to throw it a bit later, I would actually keep going on a circular motion. So this little single versus pendulum is just an exception slightly, but it's still a circular momentum. Understanding this is very important, because when you're learning to juggle, it is very important to tell yourself, okay, so I'm throwing the objects, and oh, here it's not working. I have to step forward every time to catch. Maybe it means that you need to throw a bit later. That way, the poi is going to go more towards yourself than away from yourself. So you're going to adjust, throw a bit later. Oh, yeah, it's working. But then if you throw too late, maybe it's going to go too much towards yourself. So you need to adjust and throw a bit earlier, etc., etc. This little reflection mechanic of adapting every time you observe what you're doing is very important. And here, with traditional juggling, it's going to work vertically. You want to throw later, 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 later. But with radial juggling, with no bits, it's not going to be later, 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 later. It's going to be later, 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 later. It's good to notice that with any kind of throws, I can play around and stretch the shape. For example, the no-bit throws are not doomed to be totally circular. I could go a bit vertical as well, which would do this one. Here, I'm still bringing it back, but I'm also going up vertically, creating that little, what I call cat-high mode no-bit, because we are following that idea of the cat-high here. Boom, boom. So yeah, you can also stretch it behind like this, doing kind of horizontal cat-high motion. And it's interesting to play around and stretch those shapes. When you have a given trick, try to stretch the shape of the momentum to find different variations or find a way where it's going to work better. Doing this analysis of the shape of our throw is super important and super helpful, because then it helps us to break it down and understand what are the main important steps into executing this throw perfectly. Here, on our no-bit throw, we have a circle being drawn. This circle is a bit more stretched down, but then it's very circular on the upper part. But globally, we have a circle. Here, we're going to take our circle, break it down. So, if I want to throw and follow that line with my head of doing a circle motion, I need to bring it behind. So I will need to get my hand as close as possible from my chest or my shoulder before releasing the poi. That way I make sure that when I'm going to catch, let's show it over there, when I'm going to catch, here the poi is going to be in the perfect position so that I just need to follow his motion because the head is about to fall down and take her own momentum by herself without me needing to pull it down. So here, that's the first step. We have this upper curve of the circle. We have to respect it. Boom. Then from here, it goes down. So my hand needs to go down along with the poi. And then here is the part that I see that many people forget about, is that if you want to execute the full circle, there is another curve that goes forward and up. Many people are going to catch, go down, and then go up way too soon, and forgetting this part where you need to go forward before to execute the full circle. And that shows us, for the novice throws, the three main important steps. Getting as close as possible from your chest to throw behind enough, then going as low as possible with your arm and your hand to get that down part of the circle, and then third point, going forward and then up to release again. The releasing part here being very interesting because it's not starting at the point where the poi leaves my hand. The releasing process starts way earlier, over there. Over there, when the poi starts going up, I'm starting to open my hands, and then I'm going to do that bringing toward my chest that we talked about, whilst my hand is already opening and the poi is sliding up, but still in contact with my hand, with the knob. That's why I talk about releasing and not throwing, because all the way from here to here, I'm not holding onto the poi anymore, but the poi is still in contact and being guided. This mechanic applies for every throws, but also the first ones. Why do I say that? Because it seems kind of obvious. Because on the first ones, we have this little starting. And in this starting, there is the first poi, the pinky side that we release first. But then there is this one that, while we release this one, is going to do a swing. And it is very important to remember this one, because it also needs to follow the circular shape perfectly. I'm pointing this out because many people, when they do this to then keep juggling and initiate the cascade, they very often forget that this spin that is being done while you're doing the first throw needs to go down and up towards you again as well. It's very often that people are going to do this kind of thing. They're going to restrain that little spin that you're doing during the starting, and forget that this one is going to be a throw just after. So you need to take care of it just as much. So I throw, I go down, and I throw again. That way I make sure that the poi that's going to be released after also has the perfect momentum. I will conclude with the image of the swing, which for me represents very well what is happening with poi juggling, and especially no-beat juggling, radial juggling. So you have this swing, and you have a kid on the swing. And here, the common idea with boy juggling is that the kid is the boy. The swing is you. It's your shoulder and your arm. You are the swing. And the swing here is only here to keep this pendulum motion, the frame, the shape of the movement. The swing is not giving any momentum, technically. The kid is the one that's giving this first impulse to start having the swing moving around in a pendulum motion. And this first impulse is our first pendulums that we talked about to initiate the no-beat throws. Because the same way that the swing keeps going using the momentum of the swing that happened before, so one swing motion is fed by the swing that happened before, here the no-beat throws, one no-beat throw is fed by the no-beat that has been executed before. But when you start the pattern, you need to start somewhere, so you can't make throws appear like this right away. So you need to simulate a throw, the momentum that would have been given by the throw to start the pattern, using those pendulums. Those pendulums are here to simulate the momentum that you would have had if you were already into the pattern. And that's why I put the emphasis a lot on this idea of the starting and those pendulums, where you're not forcing the momentum, because let's get back to the image of the swing and the kid. If you're the swing never puts any force on the movement. It's the kid that is going to use his body to do impulses and keep the swing going. You are the swing, you're just guiding the frame and not influencing on the momentum. The only thing that you're influencing is the shape of the momentum, not the force of the momentum. This is the end of the workshop. Thank you all for joining. I hope it was helpful. Last reminder, if you like what I do, you can go and subscribe for only $2 per month on my Patreon account and get way more content like this, and also allow me to survive.
Don't be scared, it's all